Hello, everybody. We're back together again today to talk about some great things that need to be said on this day that we remember what happened in New York. I called it today the day the earth shook, right? When when that happened in 9/11, it is 9/11 today. When that happened, almost everybody that was at least alive at that time remembers what they were doing. Two things that stick in my mind. First of all, it was whatever time of day it was. I was working at home, and my daughter Bobby called me and said, "You need to turn on the TV right now." Okay, and I had no idea what it was. And there you're seeing one of the twin towers in that way, and then at that point, everybody's watching live for what the next couple hours or whatever until on live TV we saw another jet plane go into the other twin towers. And of course, I'd visited, been in the twin towers, in New York, and been to the top and all that over the years, so kind of knew how huge these buildings really are. And then the other image I have is the one that maybe you have also of 9/11, uh, and that is that when the President Bush is reading in the library, right? And a Secret Service or whoever comes over and whispers in his ear what's going on, and just the look, the stop look on the president's face, right? He just had a stop look, and you know what went through his mind and whatever is memorable to me. And of course, all the good and the bad came out on that day and those days that followed in New York City, and of course the Pentagon, and different things that took place, the jet that went down, a lot of tragedy there. And people get confused, they get confused to where to put God in all this. Where do I put God when things like this happen? Why did God let this happen? And it's a total, you need a total reformation of your theology a little bit. And by the way, Zion, I'm not seeing anybody. I lost my picture on here, unless you want to get it. I'll take a drink while you're doing it. We're a little more informal on this one. Right, there we go. And I don't know who to be looking for yet. But anyway, I hope you can, think with me through this, that you remember where you were, you remember what you were doing. If you were born then, so around, I may have two people in this room that weren't. I can't remember when you were born. Yeah, yeah, he doesn't remember. Yeah, and Jeremiah is in here with me on this side, and you weren't born yet. Yeah, so but if you were alive at that time, then you can remember where you were and what you were doing and what it meant. And so a lot of people, like I said a minute ago, they have questions. They don't understand where is God in all this. And sometimes they quote a scripture, and this is one that's quoted a lot, like, in all things God works for the good of them that love him and are called according to his purpose. Now, what people hear is God causes all things. God causes all things. But that's ridiculous. If you read the Bible, you can see much cause and effect, starting in the Garden of Eden, where God started everything so great, but then the enemy of God, Satan, comes and confuses the man and woman, and the woman and the man, and the story, and they sin and all that stuff. And God didn't have anything to do with it. He warned them not to do it. He warned them what they shouldn't do, but it's what they shouldn't do. He told them what they should do, what they shouldn't do. So when we come to a 9/11 event that did change the world, it shook the whole earth and changed everything. It changed how we travel. It changed how we have security. It changed, taking our shoes off at the airport, type thing, and finding who's who and what's what, and immigration, and all those things changed. Uh, and when you get through some of it, then you begin to say, well, why would God let that happen? But just like in the Garden of Eden, God didn't stop them from making a mistake. God did not stop the serpent from being evil. And so when you have this, you realize all of a sudden, hey, in all things, it says, not God causes all things, right? How about the great line that's not in the Bible, where people say, well, I just believe everything happens for a purpose. Well, me too. And you know what? Some of that purpose is to ruin you. Some of that purpose is to tempt you to fall away. Some of that purpose is to hurt you. Some of that purpose is to destroy lives. Yeah, those things. But it doesn't say God causes all things. It says in all things. And that's the key to what you want to have in your life when we know things like this happen in the world. You want to have God in all your things, in all things. So if you're into God's things, then he's going to be into your things. In all things, God works together for good. Okay. And what that means is then whatever situation it is, when this happened in 9/11, and it was such a tragedy, God did not cause it, evil caused it. And by the way, that woke up our country. All of a sudden, I've been preaching, I've been preaching a while when it happened, some years, and people were just oblivious to demonic things and evil and that. And, they said, well, there's probably a little bit of good in everybody and everything was going okay. But when this happened, the word evil entered, maybe wickedness too, but mostly evil entered the vocabulary of the United States of America. I don't know about other countries, but politicians would say there's evil. This is evil. Preachers would say this is evil. And we began to wake up that there's evil in the world. And that's when we had to realize you cannot negotiate with the devil. You cannot negotiate with evil. Right? So there's evil in the world. And all of a sudden we faced it in our country, and the rest of the world has faced it too over the years. And so with evil in the world now, I've been in other countries. So I was in Mexico when a bomb went off. No, I was in Israel when the bomb went off. I was in Mexico when President Reagan was shot, and everybody was showing that on the TV in Mexico, and they're speaking Spanish. I'm trying to figure out what they're saying. But I was in Israel when a bomb went off into the mall that we were on our way to. We were going there, and the bomb went off before I got there. It was a terrible sight to see it was a nail bomb and an outdoor kind of mall thing they have there. And I saw that. I was in London, and I think we had just left when somebody took a car and drove over. Was it either the London Bridge or maybe it was another bridge by Big Ben and all that, or whatever bridge that is, and killed a whole lot of people with a car. So evil's here, but God's not causing it. But in all these things, he can start working with everything he has, all that he has, his power, his presence, his glory, his love, his mercy, whatever level you need, angelic beings, whatever the need is, in all those things, God's going to start working some good. He didn't cause the bad, but he can sure turn on the good. And for those that love him. And so you got to realize, you ask yourself the question, is that the problem? Like, I really need to love God. I need to get in the love of God. I need to get God's love in me. I need to get into this so that in all things, whatever's going to happen in the future, in all things, God's working for my good because I love him. But also, what does it say? And for those who are called according to his purpose. And that knocks a lot of people out because they may say, well, I love God, but they just haven't quite got into his purpose yet. And that doesn't mean that you're going to quit your job and go to some other country, or you're going to quit your job and start, handing out tracts downtown Kansas City or whatever. No, there's a purpose for you right now as who you are, and fulfilling the purpose where you are in God, the level you are of faith, the level you are of commitment, whatever level you're on, you need to be into God's purpose on that level. And what happens then, your level would go up. You graduate to higher levels as it goes. But if you just ignore the purpose, then you're never going to get through this. And you can't say in all things. You say, where's God? Where's God? Instead of, oh, he's here. He didn't cause it, but he's here. Well, when that happened, by the way, a little sideline, but I don't know if anybody be interested in this, but some of you may or may not know because you're maybe new to me or us. But before 9/11 happened twice in that summer. So it happened in September of that year, obviously 9 September. But in May, and then maybe in August, or I don't know when, two different times that summer, I was in services and stopped the service and prophesied that there was coming an event that would equal Pearl Harbor, that would change the way the world is forever. And I said a little bit more about it. I was down south with one of them in a church down there, and some of the people that go to our church now or are down there now remember those prophecies. And we recorded them and sent them around the world. after the fact where you could see it dated before 9/11. I said an event is coming equal to Pearl Harbor that will change the world forever. And it did. And twice I preached that. Well, the one thing I liked about it, mentioning Pearl Harbor, is of course my parents were, and Kathy's parents were, lived in that era of World War II. They could tell me what they were doing on the morning of Pearl Harbor, and so you'd see they could tell you just like I can tell you 9/11 or other events, right? And one of the things though that happened is there was a lot of disunity. There was a lot of fighting over the war. There were people that said we should enter the war. There were people saying we should stay out of the war. We were already supplying arms, lots of millions and millions of arms and money to Europe, particularly the United Kingdom. So we're already involved in some degree, but we weren't in the war. Well, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, that threw us into the war. And suddenly, you can study it for yourself. There was a sense of unity in the country of what we need to do. We've been attacked and we are one. And if you attacked one of us, you've attacked all of us. And we're going to take care of this. And we're going to win this. And God's going to help us because we didn't cause this to happen. Somebody attacked us. And so that sort of happened after 9/11, sort of. I can see some folks on here now that are coming on, Nathan and John and Beth and Lee, and glad to have all of you coming in. That happened for a brief time. Now, I had hoped it would last, but it didn't last. But there was unity. There was people were coming together. They started going to church. There was a little bit of surge in church and even extra church services, even some prayer vigils and prayer services that didn't happen before. And so it was kind of good for a little bit because that's all anybody talked about. That's all we tried to figure out what's going on. We were trying to answer questions. How much danger are we in? What do we do next? Do we travel or not travel? And of course, airports closed. You couldn't, and people didn't even want to drive. They could have probably, but they didn't want to because they were nervous, didn't know what it meant. What cities? Where are we safe? Should we gather anymore? Should we go to the ball game? Whatever was going through everybody's mind, but it was one mind, and it was really beautiful. And then honoring, another beautiful thing was honoring our first responders. Kathy and I had the super pleasure of being in New York City. I think the first year, like it would be 9/12 or 9/13. I don't know when. But we were there, and we were there on the day of the parade when they had the Veterans Day parade. It was stupendous. The unity, the joy. You saw the fire, the New York Fire Department go, and the police department go, and veterans go, and Army go, and the flag flying, and people singing, and such unity. It's so sad, isn't it, that people have been able to tear apart the unity that we had. And that's the other sad part of it. If God wants us to have, if we want to have unity, and we do, and God wants that unity, particularly of the spirit, right? It's sad that for some people it takes a evil event or a wicked event, something bad to happen to bind us together. It would be sad if that's the only thing that would save our country now, is that it was a world war, which God forbid, right? But what would it do for us? Bind us together, pull us together. And that would be a good thing. I don't want to have it obviously, I don't want to have it done by war. So that's why I warn in my book, If You Only Knew, right? The Guide to the Clueless Generation. If you don't have that, you can still get it free if you'd want to download it right now. You can go to More Faith, More Life and download it for free. But letting people know that we could go to World War III. But everything that is looking bad right now is preventable. If you talk about inflation, you talk about a war, you talk about the stock market, you talk about the inability to buy. You can't get things like you used to. It's hard. You have to order them, and it takes forever to get them. Things like that. All of these things that we're facing right now on here in Europe and everywhere in Asia, the countries, everything is preventable. It's also predictable that if we don't do the preventable, then we will have something take place. And I think that's what people are trying to tell us. Bad things could be coming, but it is preventable. But if we don't do the preventable, then they will come. And So I'm kind of in that camp. If you'd like to get the book, you can read that and see where what's happened to us and the division. I grew up in also when the Vietnam War was being was being protested so much, and uh, the division is worse now in some ways. We had also the riots, as we're trying to work the black community, the African Americans, into a better position in our culture, and give them their rights, and all the marches that happened. That was happening. The Vietnam War was happening, and protests against the war and protests against everybody hated police. That's when they start calling the police pigs and things like that. It was not very pretty. And then things got better, and now things are. Maybe it's deeper rooted now, worse in some ways, but whatever's coming, if it's bad, it can be prevented, because evil can be prevented by the people of God who turn and get the Spirit of God moving in us. Because the only thing that can change the hearts of people that are bitter and angry and divided is the Spirit of the living God. It's the only thing that can do it. And so I always liked watching the films of World War II films, whether they be real or fake or documentaries, because of that unity that rose up. People were all working together, and I really liked that a lot. And I would like to see that. One of the things, though, that we know for sure, and we'll end on this one. One of the things we know for sure is when something tragic happens, that's not God's will. God's will is to restore humanity to its highest level of being humans. In other words, it's a little bit like the very end of the age is a little bit like the restoring of the Garden of Eden, where the glory of God and the presence of God, and that's kind of where we're going. So God is not in the business of destruction; He's in the business of restoration. Destruction comes, but every time it does, He restores. We have that through the Old Testament. God would warn them that destruction is going to come to the temple or to a city or whatever. But if they would turn and do the preventable, then it wouldn't happen. Or if it did happen, God would then always promise, I will come back to you and I will restore what you've lost. I will restore what's happened. Right now, we need a lot of restoration in our country. I am concerned we're not doing the preventable. We're doing the emotional right now. People are responding emotionally rather than logically. And so we'll see. We'll see. But whatever comes our way, if we're in what God's doing, God will get into what we're doing, right? In all things, everything that you're into, God will get into it with you, right? God will get into it with you, and He'll show you the way out of it. Tragedy is terrible. 9/11 was terrible. There's no excuse for that kind of evil in the world, but it happened, and we survived, and we learned, and we grew in a certain way, but it didn't take long for us to go back to our old ways. And now we are in a part where we need to move into the things that will prevent tragedy, prevent war, prevent a stock market crash, prevent all these things that we don't want to see happen, higher prices, inflation, all those kinds of things. So, but it's going to have to be done. We're going to have to initiate something spiritual has to happen in our country to change the hearts of the people. I hope you'll help me do that. Be sure and follow us along this.